As I was saying before, we're going to import our appliance. You need to, as always, go to your downloads folder and grab the btrisk.ova file. I need to rename it. I don't want you to worry about this. It's just to make sure that I don't have conflicting file names. VirtualBox is pretty good at mitigating against that, but it's not perfect. Okay. Once you have your VM imported, you can, at that point, activate it. And as we see here, we really don't get any really good clues as to what's going on. This is nothing like our first attempt when we looked at the Metasploitable VM. We get nothing here other than maybe it's an Ubuntu. Did somebody's mic go hot? Did somebody have a question? I thought I heard somebody's mic go hot. Okay, never mind. So we have BT-RISC running, but we really have nothing here. So of course, we must then go into our no, that's the wrong password. Okay, I'm a little worried because I can't get my tablet to connect to this presentation. So I'm wondering if others are having a hard time connecting as well. Okay, if my display doesn't make sense, if my whatever, if something doesn't make sense, please let me know. Okay, finally got in. Somebody else just got in as well. If you got in and you were struggling just now trying to get into WebEx, I apologize. I am currently sharing my desktop. You should be seeing it, but you might not. Please accept that I am recording this this presentation, and I will be sharing it. Even though there's already a video on how to do this and learn, I'm making this spoken presentation so that you have that as well. Okay? I'm sorry that it's not. I don't know if you're seeing my desktop, but my tablet isn't seeing my desktop right now, which is fine. Okay. So we imported our BT-RISC VM. Didn't get any clues from it. That's fine. So that means we have to go in and attack it here. As always, before we even start that, verify our address. Perfect. Our network is the 56 network. There is value in today's presentation keeping track of this information. Oh, look at that. It's showing up for me now. So that is Cali. Now that we have that, we can do a detailed scan of the environment. Before we do a detailed scan of the environment, of course, we must scan the network. Sorry, I've only had 2 cups of coffee today so far, so I'm not awake yet. Okay, as always, we must understand our environment. We know that 56.1 is our gateway address. 56.100 is the IP address of our DHCP server. Even though it's virtualized, it still needs an IP address. We know the last one in our list is typically the scanning IP. It also corresponds with our IP for Cali. This leaves this IP unknown. This is probably our target IP. So let us capture that as BT-RISC. Ready? And now we can do a detailed scan. news. We've done a detailed scan, and we found a couple of things. First off, we found BSFTP daemon. We could try targeting that. We also found a web server. So let's take a look at that. Sorry, I had to run downstairs. Given that we have a web server, next thing we want to do is take a look and see if we can't find some web stuff. So we always use derb and Nikto. Let's do that now. Copy paste is your friend. First off, right away we see a directory called uploads. We're definitely going to take a look at that. Okay. Let's also run Nikto, because we never know which is going to give us the results. Often we're going to find information through both of these scans. Sometimes one works, the other doesn't. Right away we get an indication of a config.php file, which is probably an indication of some kind of a web application. All of these are very interesting and worth investigating further. Takes a little long. And there's the big one. Some kind of a login page has been found. So of course we are going to take a long, hard look at that one. And we're done. So we've got a config indicating an application. We have a login page. We definitely want to take a look at that. And as I said here, we also found an uploads directory as well. So let's start taking a look at these by firing up our browser, which apparently I double tapped. That's fine. So let us again go to that IP address. Okay. First off, if you know how to speak Turkish, please speak up now. Does anybody know how to speak Turkish? Whole lot of silence on the chat channel right now. And I do want to do a sanity check. We haven't looked at this, correct? And I do want feedback now, I'm being serious. Have you seen the BT Risk activity before? We have. Have you actually done the Turkish attack? Okay, perfect. I didn't think we had, judging by what I saw and learned. But as I said, these tend to get a little confusing, the number of attacks I have to do. So this is what we have here. We have this Turkish site. If you go through and you take a look at some of the content, I ran this through Google Translate at one point, and it was just a bunch of whatever, ephemera that they were talking about. Didn't really give us anything of no value here, but we did see a folder called Uploads. Let's take a look and see if there's anything in Uploads. And there isn't. And we also saw, and you can start a separate because we are going to use a login page. Now, Gires means login, I think. I can't remember, but I think it means login. But again, this is all Turkish. So we're done, right? We don't speak Turkish, so we're done. Fortunately, that simply is not the case. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what language the interface is written in. The exploits are going to take advantage of programming in languages that we understand, specifically in this case JavaScript. Who cares what language the results are thrown back at us? We understand JavaScript and we can work with JavaScript. We don't have to worry about understanding the Turkish language that envelops the JavaScript code. Okay? And that's what we're going to do. So as always, we're going to try and log in. Tick or 1 is equal to 1, and then hash or dash dash, whichever. Let's try logging in. Okay, there was a JavaScript. Wait a minute, that was pretty fast. Let's try that again. Like, that is fast. It's not even, like, if you try this on your end, it's so fast, right? Now, we could research this, but it's saying that there's something missing from our username, okay? And there wasn't a lot of activity here. There wasn't trying to communicate back to the server and then a response. And I mean, that can happen fast in a virtualized environment, but that was fast. Almost so fast as to potentially indicate that, you know what, maybe, just maybe, there's something JavaScript-y going on here. And when we review, I hate this layout. Let me make this a little bit bigger so that you guys, I don't know how clear that's coming through. But when you actually take a look at the JavaScript that's inside this block of text here, there's a simple JavaScript function called control. All right, and when we take a look at this JavaScript, it's pretty straightforward. It's looking for an @ symbol, and it's looking for a btrisk.com domain, which is what we got here. It was missing the @ and it was missing btrisk.com. And that's when it threw the error. Otherwise, it just submits it. Okay? So the JavaScript is looking for specific strings, and if it doesn't find it, it's going to throw an error. Well, let's give it what it wants. I'm going to keep that open because we're going to have to come back to that. If I do something, believe it or not, as simple as @btrisk.com and try my standard injection again, we're in. Okay? Did anybody have any questions on that? Okay, so we were able to log in. Okay? And recall, we had an uploads directory earlier. So let's see if we can't take advantage of that. I believe we have looked at deploying remote shells in one of the activities earlier. One of the Chaoptrics we deployed a shell. Anyway, if not, what we're going to do next is we're going to deploy a shell. If we can figure out how to upload a PHP file that has our remote shell in it, and then we can load it, we can then start a listener in Kali, and then that listener will act like a terminal for us because the remote shell will talk back to our listener. Okay? For this to make sense, you really have to understand your environment. Well, come to the top. There we go. This is the environment under which we're operating. We have btrisk here. We are attacking it from Kali, but we are attacking this site. What we want to do is we want to upload a remote shell to btrisk and tell that shell where to find Kali. Okay? So when we upload our shell, our payload, to this remote server, part of the information will be the IP address as to where to find Kali and what port to talk on. And then we go back to our Kali, we start a listener on that port. Once we've done that, we load the uploaded file. You rarely load, you can deploy it, you have to deploy it, but you rarely load your remote shell before starting your listener in Kali. Okay, so deploy payload, start the listener, load the payload. And of course, make sure you configure your payload before you deploy it to have a port and IP address that is available on Kali. And that's what we're going to do. Any questions on that? Okay, So, first thing, let's see if we can upload some stuff. Documents, desktop, all supported types. Oh, so they're filtering. Let's go all files and see if we have a little bit more luck. Home, K1, let's upload a text file. Gondor. Again, instant response, and I don't have to speak Turkish to say, hey, I'm looking for some kind of an image file. Kind of made sense when I tried to select it, limited what it was going to allow me to. So I'm saying, hey, I want it, and it's saying, nope, JPEG or PNG only, apparently. Okay? Again, and I didn't emphasize this the first time, but let me emphasize it now. Never, ever, ever, as a web developer, trust anything coming back from a browser. When we did our login, we trusted the browser and its JavaScript to do our security for us. And we were able to circumvent it quite easily. All right? Never trust any data from a browser. Same thing here. Our Gondor. All right, let's inspect this element as well, which is, by the way, upload or submit. I can't remember which it is. But when we take a look at this, again, we have an input type equals button, value equals submit, our Gondor, on click, call the get file function. Well, let's see if we can't find our get file function. Okay, and that's what we have right here, function get file. Okay, and we can take a look at this. Again, we can take a look at all of this and see what we see, and you always should, really, at the end of the day. And we could go through and modify this and allow us to upload the file types that we want. And there's nothing wrong with that approach. However, given again that they are trusting JavaScript to fix it, and to be honest, this button is the only thing that is calling that get file function, let's just say the hell with it. Let's go in here, change it from a button to an input type equals submit. All right. Value equals Gondor, we can change that to upload, but we can simply get rid of the on-click event. We don't need that. If we change it into a submit, we don't have to call JavaScript to upload our data. All right. If we just say, hey, input type equals to submit, value equals to Gondor, click away so that it commits that change. So now when I say, hey, upload my text file, and it looks like it worked. And I go back and I check my document to make sure that I still have, I should have just done the select object. Well, this is tedious. Okay. Inspect element. Again, because I haven't reloaded this page, I just hit the back button. My JavaScript, my DOM manipulation, let's call it a DOM manipulation in this case. My DOM manipulation is such that I can still try uploading something else. So that's good. It's not permanently broken, but the session means that my edits are still in place. Recall that uploads directory before. Now, I was successfully able to upload something they weren't expecting. Are there any questions on that? Just a quick recap. The main problem with the BT Risk environment is that they are trusting security through JavaScript by allowing their security to reside in the browser and not on the server. They've opened themselves up to this attack. Now that we have successfully uploaded something unexpected, we can take that to the next level. And by the way, I need to verify, I haven't checked this in a while. Fine. There it is again. Okay. I am now at the top of page 5 of the Word document. Okay. So, I don't really need my JavaScript information anymore. I can close that down. Next thing I want to do is I want to go back here and I want to open up a new tab because we're going to start doing some new stuff here. And because we are going to start manipulating files, as we usually do in a scenario like this, I'm going to create a working directory. Just like I did for K1, K2, Metasploitable, and DVWA, I'm making a directory for BT Risk. Okay? And what I want to do is I'm going to show you something quickly. Have I shown you the string underscore shortcut? String underscore says take the last argument from the last command and reuse it. The last command was makedir. The last argument was BT Risk. When I say cd string underscore, oh well, it's gone. Trust me, it works. I don't know why it didn't work this time. I typed that right. So now that's going to bother me. Anyway, so I'll come back to that at a different day. What we want to do is we want to use a reverse shell. As we often see, in our user share folder, we have a bunch of supporting documents that can be used in our pen testing activities. One of the directories that we have are web shells right here. Okay? When we take a look at that, there's a subdirectory for a lot of the different environments, including PHP. And when we take a look at the PHP folder, we have a number of PHP shells that we can try and take advantage of. The one we're going to look at is the PHP reverse shell.php file. But I want to draw your attention. There's a lot of support information in the USR share folder, and in the USR share web shells folder, there's a bunch of different programming environments that you can try taking advantage of. Very few people still do Perl, but if you find an old Perl web server running somewhere, it's probably got vulnerabilities running, and that's what they're showing here. But we, of course, are going to focus on our PHP. And when we look at that, there's a few shells here, but we're going to take a look at the reverse shell because that's the more robust one. We need to modify this, as I said before, to use the correct IP address and port number. I don't want to mess with the original file. As always, I'm going to copy USR share, word lists, web shells. Not word lists. User share, web shells here. Sorry. PHP and then PHP dash reverse PHP shell, and I want to copy to this current location. So I have it here. Now, does it need to be executable? Probably not. Certainly not how we're going to use it, but that's out of scope for right now. Now we want to take a look at this. There's a couple of ways we can do this. We can do nano. I would probably do vi, but I'm not going to do that to you. But to be honest, we've got a pretty good text editor here. When I select open, and please do not follow along. When I click on open, and then I go home, BT Risk, and I open up this shell, there are times when this thing just fails miserably. Okay? Actually, this is better than I thought it was. Last time I tried to use this text editor, the context highlighting just basically caused it to crash. If this crashes for you, don't use it. Okay? If it doesn't crash, it works fine, then use it, that's fine. Okay? We need to go in and modify our reverse shell to use the Kali IP address. My Kali is 146, is 146. It recommends port 1234. You know what? Port 1234 is fine. just as long as I track it, okay? So I've made one simple change. I have changed this because I'm going to deploy it to BT Risk. I must give it a path back to Kali. I do that by identifying the IP address of where the listener will run. The IP address and the port of the listener. That's what we're configuring on these lines. Once I've made that change, Control S to save it. The asterisk disappears up here. My file has been saved. I can then close it down. Okay? If, and this has happened, if you try doing that inside of this text editor with this context-sensitive highlighting and it crashes, which it has done, you can just as easily do it in Nano. Go down, scroll down, make the changes. You're going to have to type it in or use the terminal copy paste. I don't care. I find Nano is far more reliable. Control O to save, Control X to exit. Regardless, what you want to do is ensure that you have configured the IP address to your Kali and you've recognized the port. Okay? If there are no questions, I'm going to keep moving forward. It doesn't look like there are any questions. Perfect. Now, we know that we can upload files here that are not standard. Click on Browse. We're going to go back to our root folder, go into our BT Risk folder, and we're going to specify our shell that we created. We're going to select that, and we're going to tell it to upload it. When we do that, and we reload our uploads directory, there is our shell. And if we click on it now, it throws an error, but it stops loading. And the reason it's done that, if you try and do this and it throws an error, there's a very real chance that you failed to start your listener. And that's what we need to do next. Again, a new tab, because I'm going to start my listener, nc-nvlp, and then the P is the port is 1234. I am currently on page 6 of the handout. The NC command stands for netcat. It does cat concatenation or the cat command, but it does it over the network. The N means don't do any DNS lookups. The V is verbose mode, so we can really see what's going on. L tells it to listen and not to initiate anything, so it sits there listening, and it's listening on port 1234. Now, when I hit that, when I hit enter, what happens is that it's sitting there waiting, all right? But it's waiting on the IP address of Kali. And we've told our shell when to do that. So watch here, and when I hit the shell now, right away it starts a shell over here. Also note, it's trying to load. Right? It's trying to load the page, and we can see up here in the tab that it's trying to load that page. Okay? And now that we have it loaded, we are in. Okay? The bottom of page 6 of your handout, I wouldn't mind if you take a look at that, please. There's a link there that talks about different shells that you can use. We're going to use the Python one, I like it. We're going to use the os.system one in a future class. We may already have used that one. Can't remember if we used that. But here are a number of shells that you can try if you're trying to spawn a shell somewhere and you're not getting a great interface. I use this one a lot, and it seems to work well for me. And that's the one we make reference to in the Word document. And that's what we're going to do. That's the first thing we are going to do. We're going to do, okay, so my video is lagging a little bit. I'm sorry about that. Hopefully it'll catch up. So what I want to do here is Python-C to execute a command. The command I want to execute is to import a module called pty. And then the second command is pty.spawn, open bracket, open double quotes, because I've already got the single tick going, bin bash, like that. Close double quotes, close bracket, close semicolon, or single tick, I should say, and then who am I? Perfect. All right. The link that I shared with you says you should start bin shell. It's just a shell at this point. You can start any shell you want. If bash doesn't work, rather than spawning bin bash, you can just spawn bin shell. All right. I like bash. I'm a fan of the born again shell. Any questions? Okay. So I have successfully started a shell. I'm at the bottom of 7 of your handout, or halfway. I'm on page 7 of the handout. I have spawned a new shell, and I'm in as who am I? Okay. That's good, but as we saw when we were looking at the Chaoptrix series of virtual machines, we saw over and over again that users can be lazy, okay? And that's possible here as well. We saw a login page back here. So users can log in. We never really got their username or passwords, but we did see that there was a login page. All right, that's interesting. We don't know who the users are. We don't really understand anything other than that there is this login page. This also means that there's an application, right? Because it seemed to do something when we specified a MySQL injection. So there's probably a MySQL database running somewhere as well. That's the next thing we are going to do. We're going to take a look wherever we are in the file system. And when we started the shell, we ended up in the root of our file system, which isn't very good for us. So what we really want to do is we want to change into the correct directory. By and large, most directories, most web applications on most Unixes are in the var dub folder. All right. The reason being is that the var directory is used for content that can change unexpectedly. We see our log files here because they can change unexpectedly. We often see database files here because they can grow quite quickly unexpectedly as well. And we often see websites here. Same reason. You may say, well, what's the point? I mean, it's all on the root of the file system. And in a lot of environments, that is true. But if this was a production environment, I would not only have a separate partition, I would probably have a separate physical drive for the var partition, the var directory, I should say, so that anything that went into /var would move off to a completely separate drive. If that drive ever got full or got corrupted because of intensive file I/O operations, it wouldn't take down the entire file system. It would just take down the applications that use it. If you want to go more granular, you want to move your database onto a separate drive, your website on a separate drive, your logging on a separate drive, you could even do that as well in a production environment where they're physically separate devices. So if one goes down, it doesn't take the other ones with it. That's typically how a sysadmin would set up the var directory structure. Okay, we see an HTML. Let's go into HTML and see what's going on here. And right away, we have a bunch of stuff. Okay, let's take a look at the login folder, the login.php file. Please note, I hit tab and it doesn't work. Of course it doesn't work because it's a hacked site. But when I take a look at this application, I scroll back up to the PHP code. Well, let's do this. When I take a look at the first 10 lines, it must not be config. I'm sorry, I was looking at the wrong one. My apologies. Let's take a look at config instead. Config.php. Okay. When we take a look at the config.php file, we find the root username, and as we've seen before, root spelled backwards as the password. Now, as I mentioned when we were looking at the case series, this is unacceptable. This is just batshit crazy right here. This is not good. I shouldn't be swearing when I'm recording these things, but regardless, this is batshit crazy. You never want to run a web or a internet-facing application. You never want to run these server processes as root. You never want to use root as the connection string inside of these applications. It's two different things. It's two different roots, but it's the same underlying problem. This connection string information, now that it's compromised, gives me wide open access to the database. The password sucks. They shouldn't have used that. But even though I have, even if the password was better, the fact that I was able to compromise the connection string information means that I can now connect to the database as root. Let's do that now. Okay. To do this, what we need to do is type in MySQL and the user as root and to prompt me for a password. And it says, give me your password, and the password is tour. Okay, and I'm in. All right. We also saw that the database is Deneme, D-E-N-E-M-E, so we're going to use that database. Before I go any further though, one of the reasons we used the Python command to create a better shell is that that compromised shell we had running before simply would not allow us to log into MySQL. Okay, so that's something else to keep in mind. If you are able to start running commands in your remote shell and they're not running properly, try loading one of the shells that I gave you on that link in the Word document and see if those don't allow you to run especially interactive applications like the MySQL command line tool. All right, because it's an interactive one and it has questions and answers, I needed a better shell, so I forced one to load using the Python command. All right, so I want to use the Deneme database, so use D-E-N-E-M-E semicolon. Perfect. And now that I've used that database, I want to show the tables. Okay, where do I have the commands? Apparently I don't actually have the commands. We're now on the terminal on page 11 of the handout. I don't actually have the commands anywhere, but that's okay. The next command we want to do is show tables. And when we do that, it says there's really only one table. It's called user, find, select, star from user. And we see that there are a couple of users and parola. Anybody want to guess what parola means in English? What the Turkish word parola means? Anybody want to guess in chat? I will not mock you, I promise. Yep. Derek wins the imaginary money. Parola is password. And those are unlikely to be hashed passwords. Those look like plain text passwords. Not bad ones. They're a combination of letters, numbers, and special characters. Not the greatest, and repeating. All right? So, what does that mean? Well, it means that somebody is using this password. Maybe it's root. And why don't we try that and see if that's what's happening? Okay? And that's what we do next. Now that I've found some passwords, I'm going to exit out of MySQL, and then I'm going to try and become root, su-. And the password, of course, ASD123 asterisk asterisk asterisk. Because it's a crappy shell, it echoes back when we're typing in a password. In a real shell, it wouldn't do that. The prompt has changed from a string to a hash. The username has changed from www.data to root. But at the end of the day, we do the who am I, and we have become root. A little contrived. This part in the activity, things get a little contrived, I'm not going to lie. But again, it shows two key underlying, actually 3 key underlying points. Never trust anything that you get from a browser, which was the first thing we did. The second thing, Always look for clues. Look for clues, look for clues, look for clues. Try stuff. And the third thing is don't reuse passwords. We've seen time and time again that the laziness that people have can result in compromised systems. I suppose something could also be said about using root as a connection string in your databases, but I hope I've verbally beaten that out of you by this point. Are there any questions? Does that make sense?